The heat is still on.
Massive game.
New Zealand to win.
Great kick.
It's been a terrible year for little Wallabies.
You're missing an injection of life.
Stupid guys think they're so good.
Hello and welcome to episode 246 of RuggaMatrix International. I'm your host, Jero Sen. As always, joined by this man, Ben Kimber. G'day, Benny.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Great to have you here. We have a studio audience tonight of one person.
We do.
Adrian Moose Skeggs over there. So
exclusive ticket.
He's exclusive ticket. So thanks for joining us tonight. Adrian, keep it down in the corner. Ben, we're not going to mess around. What is your strike issue of the week?
Well, mate, we're in the hangover after the British and Irish Lions. We got back into our Super Rugby full on,
Agreed.
and unfortunately, mixed bag for Australian rugby. But the focus tonight has got to be, as we look at these Super Games, how we throw ahead to the Rugby Championship, and particularly for us, it's the Waratahs woes and the Wallabies defensive woes, because we've mentioned a couple of times during the year that the Waratahs have struggled. All the Australian teams have struggled at various times. But in particular, the big worry is the defensive woes of the Waratahs and what that might mean for the Wallabies.
All right, fair comment, because the Waratahs' defensive woes, I can't believe this team only a couple of years ago won the Super Rugby title, and they've completely fallen apart.
And they were built on their defence back then, weren't they, really?
Yeah, absolutely. They've absolutely fallen apart. And I keep saying defence is about attitude, and the attitude doesn't look right. And if you look at that game the other night against the Western Force, the attitude was on one side of the field with Matt Hodgson, who finished up in grand style, and there was none on the other. So there's a massive hole there. The movement of Gray, Nathan Gray, the defensive coach, who's been doing both jobs, Australia and New South Wales, to solely Australia has been an interesting one. But they don't leave a great legacy. Cheika's legacy was a title, but after that, it's all downhill. The legacy for Nathan Gray as well is downhill, and he'd be filthy about that. So given what you've thrown up in your strike issue of the week, we're going to take it from there.
Well, mate, I'm going to take it downhill. That's where I'm going to take it. Because, like, to be frank here, it is a significant worry. We've said this a bit earlier in the season, that the Wallabies are coming together now. They're off a poor year. They had a poor year last year. Cheika is now getting more of what he's asked for, which is he's bringing his team together, which means that Nathan Gray stepping out of the Waratahs, Stephen Larkham stepping out of the Brumbies. So his attack coach and his backline coach and his defence coach have got two of the worst records in Super Rugby at the moment. The Brumbies can't score a try and the Waratahs can't stop one. And he's now bringing them in to bring this Wallabies side together. So that's a real worry. But let's dig into this Waratahs effort and just how bad it is a little bit more. One of the mates of the show, Ian Payton, wrote a good piece and looked at the numbers. But in losing to the Force 40-11 in Perth, 40-11 to the Force, that is a massive scoreline for the Tars. That's the fourth straight game they've leaked 40 points or more. The seventh time this year in 15 games, which are both unprecedented in Australian rugby, according to Pato. But he put this in context in his story in the Daily Telegraph. He said, the Waratahs only conceded 40-plus points 12 times in the previous 281 games since 1996, and once went 7 years, 03 to 2010, without doing it once. So they aren't just having a poor year, they're having the mother of all poor years, and the man in charge of that has just moved to take over the Wallabies defence when the All Blacks have been giving us a touch-up. So it is frightening. It's frightening.
Yeah, it is. So why is it happening? So the thing about the Force is they play with a lot of enthusiasm. The teams that they've played against recently have come against the Waratahs with great enthusiasm, whereas if you meet a team with great enthusiasm, you have to match them in defence. And what I'm seeing there, they're not getting around the corner and helping their mates. And you know, it is diabolical when half a break is made, there's one or two stragglers chasing. The Waratahs just look like they're going to be broken every time. Yep. So they're not, it doesn't look, and I hate saying this about players, because players don't want to go there and lose, but it looks like they're just not interested, mate.
Yeah. And I think, and this, you know, I think, you know, I'm in agreement with the vast amount of social media I've seen in Australian rugby the last week or so. I'm going to leave it as much at Daryl Gibson's door as you've got to leave it at Nathan Gray's door. Nathan Gray has shown he can be part of a successful team in the past, as Gibson has to a certain extent as well. But that team, and you touched on it, it is attitude. Defence, all the teams say, a huge amount of defence is the attitude and the perspective that they bring as a team.
100%, because you can be a limited player but still play a really good defensive game.
That's right, you can tackle your heart out all day. And from minute one, because the first try by the Force was in the 52nd second of the game, through to the final minute of the game when Hodjo kicked that goal, the Force were on top and the Tars defence looked like a real worry. And Gibson does not have this team mentally in any sort of shape to be playing the kind of rugby they are. Now, the Force, admittedly, had everything to play for in wanting to send off one of their greats. Matt Hodgson, a friend of RuggaMatrix, known him for many years, known his family for many years. What a way for him to go out. But it really, to me, epitomised the kind of player Matt Hodgson is and the kind of play that we aren't seeing from the Waratahs. Hodgson was a guy who I remember him coming through the club ranks and thinking, will he go far enough? And he just kept, the ticker that guy had, that he kept moving and kept going, and the team, the Force team around him, brought that together for him on the day and showed the Waratahs exactly what team play is like for Hodjo.
Yeah, so the thing is, when a team like that performs so, and I saw a few comments going into this, Benny, about, from Kiwis in particular, that everyone's sort of jumping in on top of the Waratahs. There's a good reason for that, because people have been sacked in the past in positions of head coach. Ewan McKenzie was one of them, pushed out the door for not performing. Well, he got the team up to the top, right? I was there in 08 and I left soon after him at the Waratahs. So what has to happen here is when you take the responsibility of coaching the biggest state in Australia and you do not aim up
all the resources in the world,
you are responsible then for the slings and arrows that come your way, because there's someone else out there waiting to take your job and you need to be able to live up to it. So yes, they deserve every single bit of criticism that should be put their way. They're about to axe a team out of Australia, right? And we've got the biggest state in Australia playing what they don't care.
and they came 16th.
Yeah.
I think was it 4 wins and 11 losses? The Tars were disgraceful, and there needs to be a hell of a lot of change going on at that organisation to make sure they reverse that. I just want to touch on a couple of points of the game. If you've still got the game on tape, check these out. But clearly in that first minute, very poor, simple defence out wide, saw Alex Newsom cut away for a try. But then go through the whole game. A couple of points in particular, the 68th minute, Naisarani for the forced run upfield. The Tars defensive line was so out of sync, they weren't in touch with each other. And then 3 minutes later, the same thing. The force going across the field both ways and just finding holes. Tars players running up out of the line aimlessly, back in defence. They were nowhere, and they were lucky to only be beaten 40-11.
Yeah. Yeah, and to see so many of those games with 40 points piled up against the Waratahs is just not good enough. And that Australian conference is a shambles. And the only shining light, from my point of view, has been the courageous effort by the Western Force in the face of extinction. But there's been a big play for them by heavy financial backer in WA that could help save them. That's not everything, but the decision's going to be a tough one to make.
Yeah, we saw Twiggy Forrest come on the field after the game and call the team together.
Yep.
And the man is worth, for those who don't know, he's an Australian mining magnate, if you will. He's worth about $5.5 billion or thereabouts. And he went onto the field and it was on camera. He drew the force around and said, quite frankly, he will back them. And that kind of financial and business muscle coming behind the team puts another interesting spin on what has been a very poorly managed process by the ARU to see where this might end up. If that force team is shot now before next season, what a shame that would be for that team. They've shown the community commitment, they've shown the business commitment, they've shown the on-field commitment, they've shown they're building something, and for them to go would be a really, really bad outcome for Australian rugby.
And as you've mentioned, probably the best coach team in the competition, really. When you look at the playing stock, they have been able to lift above and beyond what many teams have expected of them because they're well coached. And now, if you can now the difference here is you can't always coach elite players who are very gifted, who are sometimes uncoachable. If you're a coach like that, that's yet to be tested. But I just want to throw that in there as a possible curly one. Well,
and the rumour is Vessels will end up at the Rebels if the Force get punted. But there was also, you mentioned, you know, I suppose it was very romantic in some ways. The Force, the Battlers out on the rear. A team, an unwanted team up against a team strong in Wallaby, strong in resources, etc. If, in case you missed it, check out the 78th minute. It was caught on microphone, but Hodjo sledged Michael Hooper, and basically what I heard him say was, you know, you don't need the extra $2 million, mate, or something in those regards, because essentially there's $2.5 million in extra money that goes into the Waratahs via their Wallabies versus the Force, who don't get any of that extra funding. Yeah. So you had a team which has got extra, and that's a hell of a lot of money in Australian rugby. An extra $2.5 million worth of cattle, rugby cattle on the field. Hodjo sledges him in the 78th minute, knocks over the 79th minute field goal, and was celebrated, and rightly so, in Perth. But really, that you could see that battler mindset and the attitude made all the difference.
Almost a drop goal. It was a conversion or a kick.
Conversion.
Yeah. Was it conversion or just a penalty?
It was
I can't remember.
Yeah, whatever.
But it was a place kick anyway.
It was a penalty. Sorry, it was a penalty.
So that was it was a great finish too. Just great scenes with the
Yeah.
family and an emotional night. And he's just one of the good guys.
Yes.
These are the good guys of Australian rugby, and we want to see the good guys have a win for once.
Yeah.
Because they're few and far between in this corporate business.
Yeah, and another point about him too, like his omission from the Rugby World Cup back in 2011, when Deans made the mistake of not taking another number 7 over New Zealand. Ugh. He had Pocock as his only 7. He ended up Pocock having to miss a game. He played the Force 8, the big fella from the Force. I've forgotten his name, number 8. He's been out, McCalman. He played McCalman open side in 2011. And he had Hodjo, one of the hardest working on the ball open sides in the game, sitting back in Australia and devastated to have missed out on that World Cup, and he should have been there. Could have been a different story.
Don't start me on Robbie Deans' selections because it'll take me to the Lions series.
We'll upset the Kiwi viewers too, mate.
When he picked Justin Bieber. Nice guy, but could not coach Australia when it came to getting the sense of getting the team performing. And I know his record overall was okay, but he was employed to beat the All Blacks regularly, and he was also employed to win the World Cup, and he was reappointed before he even finished a World Cup, which I still think, Ben, is one of the greatest rorts of all time. All right.
There's been a few.
Yes, there has been. All right, so just technically, though, the Waratahs, you know, it doesn't take much to turn defence around, right? So what do they need to do? It surely is get together, have a camp, and try and get themselves sorted out attitude-wise.
Well, I think it's got to be attitude, and I said it's got to be something to do with the coaching. The head coach, Daryl Gibson, you know, he's done incredibly well. It might be financial to see him hang on, but you know, clearly something upstairs is not right in this team, and Daryl Gibson is not getting them together in the right way. They look aimless at times. They had such a poor season, mate. 4 wins. They did not beat an overseas team. 4 wins were all against Australian sides, this Waratahs side. That was simply the lowest of the low points. Defence is part of the problem, but it's not the only problem. And Gibson apparently has the faith in New South Wales to turn it around. But I tell you what, I don't have the answers for him right now because his cattle aren't that bad as that suggests.
Well, they should join the other team because the Waratahs used to be known as the Blues too, but the Blues over in New Zealand lost to the Sunwolves. So the Sunwolves, they were thrashed by the Lions in South Africa not that long ago. I said they should have been kicked out for that, almost beaten by 100 points.
Hammered by the Hurricanes.
So that means the Blues should be punted as well.
Well, mate,
they were terrible. The Blues were absolutely
That was a
dreadful.
27-point win. Sunwolves 48, Blues 21.
Look, the highlights are fantastic, and the Sunwolves looked great when they were throwing the ball, but they shouldn't have been allowed to do that. That's what happens. Look, if we had a 2-tier competition, right? If we had a 2-tier competition, then we would absolutely have these great competitions or matches every week, right? Yeah. But in this case, it shouldn't have happened.
What it looks like, though, is it looks like an end-of-season capitulation by the Blues too, right? Fair play to the Sunwolves. They've had an up and down year, a very up and down year. We've caned them at times. They could have done better at others. But to be frank, you know, that did look like a bit of an end-of-season capitulation. Kano got a yellow card. But wow, they took it to them. They took it to them through the forwards. They were throwing the ball around, and they were quite fun to watch. I'll just run through the other scores to close off the final round of Super Rugby. Sharks 10, Lions 27. So the Lions, of course, with that win, in tandem with the Hurricanes 31, Crusaders 22, meant the Lions finished on top, never having played a New Zealand side yet. And they get the full sales of a home games run all the way through. Bulls 33, Stormers 41, Force 40, Waratahs 11 we mentioned, Chiefs 28, Brumbies 10, Kings 20, Cheetahs 21 in a forgettable game, and the Jaguares 32, Rebels 29. So we're down into the finals. In that there, and looking at leading into the finals, you can't take a hell of a lot out of the Hurricanes Crusaders games. I think Beauden Barrett wasn't there, Crotty's wasn't there, the front row wasn't there for the Crusaders. So really, you're going to see different play from them in the finals. But looking at the matchups for the Super Rugby finals.
Can we just quickly, this is the first tonight,
yeah.
Let's have a look at the table, which is now up on screen. Now, it might be a bit hard to read because there's so many sides in it, but as you can see there, all the points are obviously heavily weighted towards the New Zealand sides. And then, you know, with the exception of the Highlanders are still high too, but the Blues were dreadful. So it was an absolutely brilliant Brilliant series for the Kiwis, wasn't it?
Mate, a stunning series. And they have looked fantastic, and which is really interesting because it's probably the best super season we've seen from them, and they still drew that series with the Lions. They couldn't quite get it together as well as they would have liked against the Lions. But in terms of Super Rugby, wow. I mean, you've only got to talk about what everyone's been talking about, which is 25-0, I think is the numbers.
Yep.
New Zealand wins over Australian rugby sides. The closest that Australian team went was probably the Reds Crusaders back in the first couple of rounds. But the New Zealand team's looking sharp along with the Lions.
And there you see the Brumbies, you know, they're in only because they're at the top of the Australian Conference.
Yeah. I mean, the Lions finished first without ever playing a Kiwi side.
Yep.
The Brumbies are in, you know, even though they consistently do not deserve to be there. But you know what? I've seen a few stories, you know, out in New Zealand and others whinging about the draw and all that. Mate, well, you knew all this.
Yeah.
Now's not the time to be whinging. Now's the time to get into the finals and show that you're the best team out there. So I'm a bit over it. The Lions last year also made the final playing the NZ teams. Okay, so we can't cane them too much for that. But they do have a leg up in getting the potential home finals there, which they'll be very happy about.
Yeah, I think you can't be critical of the Lions at all because they've only played who's in front of them.
That's
and
right.
They've done a brilliant job of that.
Yeah.
And I don't care who you are, but to almost put 100 points on a team is a fairly phenomenal effort.
And we knew they weren't going to play the Kiwi teams.
No.
You know, the rubber's got to hit the road for them soon. It's not. I don't think it's in the first game. I'll just read through the quarterfinal games.
Yep.
Friday night, Brumbies Hurricanes. Saturday night, Crusaders Highlanders. Saturday night, Lions Sharks. Sunday morning, Australian time, but Saturday night, South African time, Stormers Chiefs. And the semi-finals will be the winner of Brumbies Hurricanes versus, I think it's Lions Sharks. So we might see the Hurricanes Lions match up there if form proves out as per last year's final. And then the other semi will be between the Crusaders Highlanders winner and the Stormers Chiefs. Now, looking at those four games, you'd have to say that the Brumbies, the Stormers and the Sharks are all limping into the finals. Even the Stormers and Sharks who've qualified, they haven't looked like they're in great nick. They haven't looked like their teams are coming together well. So you'd have to say the Lions, the Chiefs and the Canes are all red hot to go through. Crusaders, Highlanders. Crusaders are going to be a better team and I think they should beat the Highlanders. Getting their front row back and getting Crotty back as expected, if as expected that happens, they really should be looking the goods. And, you know, my pre-season tip of the Crusaders, I'm happy to stick with as we head into these games.
Yeah, gee, a lot of forward passes are too on the weekend not pulled up. There was one pulled up in the Chiefs Brumbies game. Actually, it was a disallowed try as a result, and it was just a shocker. The ball comes out like this, it's going to go forward, and it's not being picked up, and I don't want to see too many of these happen within the 22-metre line in that attacking zone, getting away with it. We need to crack down on that. And also the offside line, my pet hate.
Yeah. It is very frustrating.
Yeah.
Forward passes in particular really make me annoyed when I watch a game and you think that's just, you know, well against the rules.
Yep.
Well, a couple other points on those games. I'm going to just mention the Crusaders specifically. It's going to be interesting to see the way they go into this final series. They've played, you know, great footy all year to get to where they have been. Not quite the complete season, of course, with that defeat on the weekend. They've still got what I think is a back line that we're going to have to really watch in these finals. They didn't step up against the Lions. The back line in particular I'm talking about here. And there are a bunch of younger guys in there who are still, I think, learning their trade at even this level, let alone the next. Led by Mo'unga, of course, at 5'8". Goodhue in the centres has been tapped for the All Blacks. But they're going to get a new level within the Super Rugby finals, and they're going to have to find something because they've got guys who, as I said, they've looked the goods, but now the heat's going to come a little bit more.
And things change. When it becomes knockout footy, everything changes. Suddenly you get a little bit more tense in those moments. The longer the game goes, that's tied, or you're just behind. The New Zealand sides are going to be under pressure for the first time this year. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to that this weekend.
Speaking of pressure, another guy I want to call out who's going to have to watch himself and is TJ Perenara. Now, for those of you who are regular
you're on
viewers,
him again.
I'm on him again. For those of you who are regular viewers, I think I said about a year ago or so, you could tell he's playing well.
I can't wait till you meet him in the pub
you can tell he's playing well because I'd starting to not like him.
Yeah.
So I think he's a fantastic player, and I was calling for him to be there ahead of Smith, I think, for many weeks. But the lip is really starting to get away from him, and I think he even got pinged against the Crusaders on the weekend for giving a bit of lip. But there's a bit more going on, but he's got to really be careful that he doesn't start to lose it a bit too much, because especially in finals footy, that can be costly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of I was looking at the.
I had to mention it, mate. He got pinged.
Yeah, I was looking at the yellow card list, and the Australian sides are very heavily represented at the top of yellow cards handed out. So that all has to do with discipline. And that can be with defence as well. You're not trusting your defence.
I think it has to do with frustration as well, right? When things aren't going well, those teams have got frustrated. I think even Izzy's got a couple of yellow cards this year.
And there was a little dust up at the end of that the Reds game at the weekend. Did you see that?
Yeah.
It
Bit
wasn't
of push and shove?
Yeah, push and shove. It wasn't
a couple of times.
It was Quaid getting stuck in there. So New Zealand's favourite guy to have a go at, and he probably gave him a bit of motivation for it. But the Reds are certainly not in the game there.
So, mate, just to recap the tips there, you have to think the Brumbies will go down to the Canes, the Crusaders will get the Highlanders, the Lions will get the Sharks, and the Chiefs, even though they've got to travel, they should get the Stormers. The Stormers could turn up, but really these teams, Brumbies, Stormers, Sharks, struggling. Yeah,
although the Bulls turned on a massive game on the weekend. It was just, not that it mattered, the result, but it was great to see entertaining football from the Bulls this year, who were disappointing generally.
Yeah, they've had a very poor year. One more little stat out of there is with the Lions taking that top spot, I read in one of the yarns, in the competition's 21 years, the top qualifiers have gone on to claim the title on 14 occasions. So basically a two out of three chance. And the second-ranked side have won 6 times. Only the 99 Crusaders bucking the trend, winning from 4th.
Great stuff. All right, let's move on, Benny.
Couple of smaller points to work through now. I just want a couple of wrap-up notes on the British and Irish Lions. Thank you to all the fantastic...
There's a bit to still tidy up there.
Yeah, there is. And thank you. It was one of the biggest shows we've ever done. We had an awesome amount of comments. I answered all the Facebook ones. I honestly have not got to the YouTube ones. There's 400 comments on there, but I will get into them. There's a lot.
That's gone up since I was diving in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff there. It was a very movable feast, I think. We did an early Sunday show last week, so there was still analysis coming out.
Mate, I've been to Barcelona and back in the meantime.
A couple of the big points to tidy up is it was raised after our show, and I wholeheartedly agree with it, that final kickoff where Reid challenged Williams. Some claims that Reid was 3 to 5 metres off from Barrett's kickoff. I don't agree with that.
3 to 5 metres?
He was offside, though. I think he was offside. About a metre or a half a metre, but he was offside. This is
not the point.
Not the point. I don't want to nail that one because it was talked about a lot, and I think he was offside. Whether they're brave enough to call that or whether they do call that in most situations, don't know, but it looked that way to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the point of the discussion was there was a refereeing decision that was overturned. Well, not completely overturned because the All Blacks got possession through a scrum, but the way that decision changed was just diabolical. And sure, other things may have happened in the game. And I said last week, Ben, the All Blacks should have won the game earlier, right? That had nothing to do with the discussion we had because it was the dramatic last chance to win the game, and it was such a spectacular way to end the match. But all right.
The only other point that came out. The only other point that came out though was we were working out how on earth Point made that decision, and we read later on was Garcés in his ear. The other French referee from the sideline was actually the one who got in his ear. And when you watched it on TV, and I went back and watched this many, many times, you couldn't quite work out what was going on, but clearly he was getting the word from Garcés in his ear, and the decision came from that side.
All right. It's just a bit murky, and probably too murky for rugby. And I think, the obvious nature of the contact of the ball, right? You grab the ball, let it go, whether it's deliberate or not. I clearly think it's deliberate. But the fact that people are arguing about that is not good enough. We shouldn't be arguing about it. If it's offside, it is offside, regardless. We've got to change the law to make sure it's clear. We've got to change a lot of laws, actually, to fix the game up in those little bits and pieces. But there should be no doubt. I don't care. This accidental stuff, forget it. Get rid of it. Just make it black and white. All right?
Well, that was actually one of the great stories I saw this week out of NZ, that they are tearing up the rugby rulebook and rewriting it to make it simpler. And the story, I think I read it on stuff.co.nz, was saying that they have taken out 50% of the words. So they are hacking the hell out of it to try to get it to something simplified. And that would be fantastic because I appreciate the point you're making. But you look at that last 2 minutes of that British and Irish Lions final test against the All Blacks, and there are probably 6 or 7 things you could have pinged or maybe not, depending on your interpretation, which is why there was so much chat afterwards and why that was so enraged, I think, from some people. But quite frankly, it was, and actually one of the good comments of the week, Tasman Tanner, an old schoolmate of mine actually made. He said, Ben, go back and have a look. And do you actually think the ball did go forward to Owens off Williams?
Come on.
Have another look.
Come on.
It is so line ball.
Unbelievable.
Another one. Anyway, 6 or 7 things.
Just let it go, Ben. That's just going
can't
too
let it go.
far.
It's too much to talk about.
Too far.
Too much.
But we need to simplify the game. Rod McQueen, who I worked with as a coach, famously said that there should be only like 2 laws of the breakdown, and that's about it. And I'd agree, but every time you make those simplifications, then coaches will try and find a way around it, and players will push the edge. I always thought it was better to be an honest player, like a player like Adam Gilchrist in cricket. If he edged the ball, he walked, right? He didn't need an umpire to say it. I always tried to play the game the same way, and if you can, and people say if you can get away with being offside, then good for you. I don't say that's just what sort of argument. That's just telling people to cheat. And I have no time for that sort of argument.
Lazy runners. You're going to get fired up on lazy runners again.
Decoy runners.
Decoy runners.
Yeah, you're the lazy runner.
Decoy runners, yeah.
I'm the decoy runners, which is just lazy way to attack. All right. There was a bit of that too on the weekend.
Oh, let's go to a more positive story then, mate.
All right. We finished on the lines?
We're finished on the lines.
Okay. Great series, by the way.
Then on our viewer comments, there are a couple of viewer comments that I'll pull out. Curtly Beale, back on Australian turf from his time
Let's pull a picture up of Curly
UK.
from rugby.com.au. There he is.
What a great story this week with the release of a Wallabies Indigenous design jersey. I thought this was great. The jersey incorporates symbols of the 14 Indigenous players who've played for Australia, and 4 of them were there. Beale, Lloyd Walker, Lloyd McDermott and Gary Ella. And if you watch that footage that's on a couple of those stories, Beale even does a little bit of a dance with the Aboriginal.
Yeah, he shakes a leg.
Yeah, it was out there.
And the great thing, Lloydie was the first one to do it, and he did it when it was really hard to do that for Indigenous players. I call a lot of, being of Indigenous background myself, I call a lot of Sevens rugby at Coffs Harbour, the Ella Sevens, and it's just, I was very proud to see Curly wear that today. Whatever you think of Curly in terms of his off-field antics are one thing, but it looks like he's come back to Australia, a more mature player, and he almost broke down there today announcing it, Ben. Yeah. So it was a really good stuff. So have a look at that. The great Indigenous jersey, and I think they'll be very proud of it.
And I think he talked about it. He's only 14. That number seems so low for Australian rugby. Only 14 Indigenous players. The great, and the great players who've been there. The Andrew Walkers, the Jim Williams, these guys, Gary Ellis. I mean, it's so disappointing that number's so low. They need to focus on that part of the game and see what they can do, surely.
Geez, Gary would be pretty happy. Out of all the Ellas, you pulled out Gary.
Well, he was there, I said. He was actually there at the ceremony.
He was there today, but out of all the group. That's very good.
And they're going to wear that jersey in the 3rd Bledisloe in Brisbane on October 21.
Yeah,
so I think that was really nice.
That's a really good story for Australian rugby, and I think they're heading out to Penrith too to do a coaching camp.
Oh, fantastic.
So,
they should do that more of those.
The players are going to help run the water, I think, for Penrith.
Oh, fantastic. That's even better.
It's something like that anyway. So I saw that in a tweet. But
another
good news.
Another Wallaby story to bring out.
Yep.
Alan Jones, the 1984 Grand Slam Wallaby coach, was in the news this week.
Yep.
He is coming back to coach the Barbarians against the Wallabies. So Checker v Jones, what do you think of that?
Fantastic. This is a dream come true. There's got to be a bit of work. I think there's got to be some spin around the side here because it's another distraction. We had a great distraction today with the Indigenous jersey, right? We've got the news about the great news with Matt Hodgson. We've got the great news about the Wallabies going out to Penrith to do their bit. So all this sort of stuff helps the Wallabies get away from the big issue that's been going on. And they've been struggling and had a horrible year last year. Any other year, and Checker would have been out the door, but there's no one else obvious coming in. Yeah.
Well, when Jones tweeted about it first and said, "I'm coming back to do something in rugby."
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be something to do with the ARU. I thought there'd be some attachment, some attachment of some kind. So it was a little disappointing. It wasn't bigger than that, but at least it's going to be interesting to see what he does.
I never forget when he went back to formally apply for the job. And a couple of years back, Ewan was in there as well, and it was very funny. It was. He's an interesting character.
He's a very interesting character.
You just have to mention a couple of names in Australian rugby and off he goes. He will not stop talking. I won't say who I mean, but he will go off for a fair while. All right, Ben, we're going to start to wrap this
viewer comments
up. So let's go to viewer comments of the week.
No Checker Watch this week because he's been off the radar.
Oh,
but
what?
He'll come back into it.
Okay.
Well, his Checker Watch has got to be, what's he going to do working with Nathan Gray to get the defence going? And Ed Logue, one of our regular viewers, was one of the guys who raised that. Here's in my viewer comments of the week. So a couple of comments to shout out. Richard Hogan on Twitter said the rumours out of Ireland. So Richard's over in Ireland. He said the rumours out there is Joe Schmidt is being lined up to coach the ABs after the World Cup, after 2019. Interesting mail. Ed Logue noted that the Lions kept the ABs to 5 tries in 3 tests, and last year in 3 tests the Wallabies conceded 16. So Nathan Gray's got a lot of work to do. Shout out to Kevin Fury, who was one of the first guys to point out to me Kieran Reid being offside from the kickoff. But he also called, if that was called, Daly could have kicked it from 50 metres out to win the series for the Lions. So there's one to get the Kiwis fired
I'll just get you to keep leaning forward a little bit, Ben, otherwise we're going to lose your head there.
Hey,
sort of moved around a bit on me.
Stretching out too far.
Okay.
Tasman Tanner I mentioned. And really, apart from that, there were far too many to mention. There were so many great comments. Thank you guys, keep them coming, and I will get into those YouTube ones.
Very good communities. They're 2 very different communities, aren't they? There's a bit of crossover, but the YouTube mob have their certain way of talking to us about the game, and then there's the Facebook mob as well. So
there were some sensational YouTube comments there too.
They're all good. There's just a different style to it, so it's great. And some of them are lengthy posts as well. I think some of those lengthy posts deserve to be on our website.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
I reckon so.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we should start getting people to get some posts onto RuggaMatrix to the site.
Yeah, so if you're interested in doing that, drop us an email.
Yeah.
Email is admin@ruggamatrix.com, and we'll get back to you about throwing your stuff on the site. So we might even give you a little byline if you want to do it regularly. I've got a guy in mind. Right. You might know. Right. Martin.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
There we go. Diatribe.
Yes, the Diatribe. Be good on our site. All right. I want to go back to a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned that I might introduce a Spin Doctor segment. I'm going to can that because I think that'll bore people to death too. Well,
I was interested.
It can be interesting. There's a bit of a sinister nature about it, and I really don't want to go into that. So we will bring that up as it is warranted down the track. But what I want to do is I like having these bigger ideas about the game, the 2 referees, all that sort of stuff. I don't want to give away too much, but I want to introduce a more of a global view, and I'm going to call it like the big picture. And the big picture is what we should be doing for the game. So we'll introduce that, Benny, and we'll have that sort of later in the show. We'll have your strike issue of the week, and then after we have a bit of a natter about that, we'll have Giro's big picture.
Big picture.
And just about some of the laws, some of the things away from the game affecting it that we should be discussing as well. So it'll give us a couple of regular things to hit every week amongst the stuff that happens from week to week on the paddock and off the paddock. So there you go, mate.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Done.
Is that about it from you, mate?
That's it. The only thing I would say is that if the Force go out having smashed the Waratahs 40-11 in the final game, if they go, it's going to be similar to some of the other crazy decisions we've seen in the past. I think I mentioned you before, Ewan McKenzie, 2008, sacked by the Waratahs and takes them to the final, and then goes up to Queensland and wins a title up there. It smells. So the ARU's got a lot in front of them. We might talk more next week about the competitions we'd like to see, we've discussed in the past, but it's just such an unhappy end of the Super Rugby regular season for Australian rugby.
All right, so who knows? The Brumbies, they've snuck in. They could pull off a miracle, Ben, and sneak into the next part. It is a sudden death now.
It is.
It is.
Anything could happen.
All right, so that is it for RuggaMatrix International, episode 245. Thanks to our special guest, 246, it's getting away from us. Thanks to our special audience member in the background there, Adrian Muskeggs. Adrian, good to have you on board. We'll have a chat to you in a moment. We might even bring you in when we do the after show. But thanks for joining us. Enjoy your rugby, enjoy the finals, and we'll see you next week on the world's most quoted rugby podcast.